The next topic we are going to discuss is the 5-number summary. While a single numerical summary, such as the average, can be useful, it is rarely sufficient to give a meaningful description of the dataset. A better picture of the dataset can be presented by using a well-organized series of numerical summaries called the 5-number summary. The 5-number summary is given by 5 numbers. The first number is the smallest value in the dataset, called the minimum. The next number is the first quartile, denoted by Q1. That is the 25th percentile of the dataset. The third number is the median, which is also known as the 50th percentile of the dataset. And then the fourth number is the third quartile, denoted by Q3, which is also the 75th percentile of the dataset. The last number in the 5-number summary is the largest value in the dataset, called the max. These 5 numbers together often tell us a great deal about the data. We are going to find the 5-number summary for this for the Stat 101 quiz scores data set. So here we have a frequency table, and we're going to find the 5-number summary: the minimum, quartile 1, median, quartile 3, max. And remember, whenever we're dealing with a frequency table, it's always important to understand what information they're giving us. So I just went ahead and I wrote down some of these scores. I wrote some of them out. So here we have a score 1. There's a frequency. That's our first data point. Then there's a score of 6. There's a frequency of 1, so that's our second data point. Then the score of 7, there's 2 of them, so that's the third and the fourth data point. After that is an 8, and it has a frequency of 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 8s, and there's the 5th through the 10th data points. And then after that's the 9th, and so on. But I just wanted to list some of these out because it's always good to remember what this information is telling us. So the first thing we're going to find in the 5-number summary is the minimum, and that's the easiest. It's just the smallest score. So you can see 1 is the smallest score. After that, we are going to find the quartile 1, which is the 25th percentile of the data. So whenever we're finding percentiles, we have to find the locator. The locator is found by the 25th, taking the 25th as a percent and converting it to a fraction. So 0.25, and then multiplying it by n. Well, right now I don't know what n is, but that's no big deal. If I just add up all of the frequencies, that will tell me what n is. And I've already done this. I went 1 plus 1 plus 2 and so on. I've added all these up, and it actually ends up being 75. So that means that n equals 75. So to find quartile 1, I'm going to find the locator first, which is found by 0.25 times 75. Now when I multiply these two numbers, I end up getting 18.75. And this is a decimal, so the rules for percentile say that we have to round this number up. And when we round it up, we actually use a symbol. It's called L+. That means the locator rounded up. And when we round this number up, we get 19. After that, we need to find, after we found L+, we need to find DL+. And we substitute 19 in for L+, because 19 is equal to L+. And so what we're really finding is D19, the 19th data point. And since we've already kind of already written these out, we can see that the 19th data point is 9. So 9 is actually the 25th percentile, or that's what quartile 1 is. It is 9. So I'm going to go ahead and write that right there. Okay, the next thing we need to find is the median. Now the median is the same thing as the 50th percentile, so we're going to find the locator of the 50th percentile in the form of a decimal, would just be 0.5. Multiply it by n. N is equal to 75. 0.5 times 75 is actually equal to 37.5, and this is a decimal, so we have to round up and find what L+ is again. And that's not very hard, because when we go 37.5, that just rounds up to 38. So the next thing we have to do is find DL plus. Well, L plus equals 38. So what we're really finding is L plus is the same thing as 38. I substitute 38 in for L plus, and I'm figuring out what D38 is. Now, I've ordered all the scores out, but I only ordered up to the 21st data point. So I need to figure out what the 38th data point is, because that is what my median is. So I'm going to look at this frequency table. I know that this is my first data point, score of 1. I know that 6, that is my second data point. Now what happens is if I go 2 plus 2, I get data point 4. And what that tells me is that the fourth data point is my last 7. And if you look here, the fourth data point is my last 7. There's no more 7s. After the fourth data point, it switches and it goes to 8. So then if I go 4 plus 6, I get D10. And that, D10, that is my last 8. Which tells me after D4 would be D5. That tells me that there's nothing but 8s from D5 all the way up to D10. And if you look here, from D5 all the way up to D10, there's nothing but 8s. Then I'm just going to add 10 to the 10 here, and I'm going to get D20. That tells me that the D20 is the last 9. And if you look here, yes, D20 is the last 9. After D20, it skips and it moves to 10. So then I'm going to go 20 plus, I'm just going to continue this same process, 20 plus 16, which would be D36. D36 represents my last 10. Then I'm going to go D36 plus 13, which would be D49. That represents my last 11. And then 9 plus 49, which would be D58, represents my last 12. And then 8 plus 58, which would be D66, represents my last 13. 66 plus 5, which would be D71, which represents my last 14. 71 plus 2, which would be D73, represents my last 15. And then add 1 to that, we get D74. Add 1 to that, I got D75. This is my last score of 24, which is the last data point in the data set. And it makes sense because there are 70, this is saying that there's 75 data points and n equals 75. So it all matches up. So back to the median, we did all this work and we need to figure out what the 38th data point is for the median. So we move along here. I know that D36 is my last 10. So I know that from D37, the term after, all the way to D49, it's nothing but 11s. And D38 falls within that category. Therefore, I know that the median, D38, is 11, which means that the 50th percentile, or my median, is 11. Moving on to quartile 3. Again, I have to find the locator. Quartile 3 is the same thing as the 75th percentile, so I'm going to find 0.75 times 75. That equals 56.25. This is another case where I have to round up and find out what L plus is. No big deal. I just round that up to 57. And then I am finding DL plus. Well, DL plus is the same thing as 57, so I'm going to substitute a 57 in for that L plus. And I have to find what D57 is. That's going to be my third quartile. So let's look here. I know that, where were we last? Here. I know that D49 is my last 11 and D58 is my last 12. So D57 is the term before D58. So if D58 is a 12 and 12s go from, this is my last 11, D49, so D50 would be a 12. It just goes through D50 through D58 are all 12. So that means that D57 is also going to be a 12, which means that my 75th percentile, or my quartile 3, is going to be a 12. And then lastly, we just find the max. That's super easy. It's just the highest score, which would be 24. And that's it. That's the 5-number summary. Now, when you have a 5-number summary, there's a graphical way you can describe this information through what's known as a box plot or a box and whisker plot. So a box and whisker plot it's basically a picture of the 5-number summary. Here you have a box. Okay, the box is made up of the middle part here, this line, that's the median. The two ends, this would be the first quartile, this would be the third quartile, and then it breaks into the whiskers. This would be the minimum, and then this other minimum would be the max. And each one of these separators represents 25%. So this is 25% from here to here is 25%. From here to here is 25%. And here is 25%. So this box, this represents the middle 50% of the data. Up here, this is the upper 25%, and this would be the lower 25%. So we have our 5-number summary here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this box and whisker plot, which is a representation of this 5-number summary. If you see here the minimum, that's right here, that was 1. So whatever the range of values, our values go from 1 to 24. So there's going to be a number line here. This actually is going from 0 to 25, where all of 1 through 24, all those numbers are listed here. So the minimum is here. That's the edge of the whisker. And then you have the max here, which is 24. So the minimum and the max. The median is 11. I miswrote that. So that's 11. So we have here quartile 1, that's one part of our box. That was 9. And if you see there's quartile 1 at 9. The median is 11. That is here. And then quartile 3 is 12. And this just tells us how spread out the data sets are. So here, from the minimum to the quartile 1, that says that the lower 25% of the data set is spread out by, it looks like 8 units. If I go 9 minus 1, that's 8. Whereas the this is the quartile 1 to quartile 3. This represents the middle 50% of the data set. And it's saying that the middle 50% of the data set is only spread by 3 units. So for the most part, the class really scored the same on their statistics test. And then from 12 to 24, this says that the upper 75% was really spread out from 12 to 24. That that has a there's 12 different degree points separating the quartile 3 from the max. But unfortunately, this really doesn't describe an accurate picture. This is not an accurate box and whisker plot for this particular data set. And the reason why is because this data set has some outliers. If you see here, this is the original frequency table. And if you see, we start with a score of 1, and then it jumps all the way to 6. Now from 6, it goes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then it jumps again to 24. So all of this information, this is all clustered together. That's where, and what these over here, there's distance between 1 and 6, and there's distance between 16 and 24. And so what we would call the score of 1 and 24, those are the extreme data points or the outliers. And if we look here at this box and whisker plot, this box and whisker plot below is actually a more accurate box and whisker plot. It still states the minimum, but it puts an X because this is it has an outlier. And then it goes to the next value, which would be a score of a 6. See, it shows that there was no scores between 1 and 6. This just represents that one data point, the min. Then it goes from 6 to the quartile 1, which was 9. The median is still 11. Quartile 3 is still 12. So we have our middle 50% of the data points here. Nothing's changed. But then on quartile 3, quartile 3 is 12. And then we make an X for our max. And we just make the line to the last data point, which was a score of 16. Now this is a much more accurate representation of the data set. So remember how this shows that this is the lower 25%? Well, now this shows that, okay, there's one person who got a 1. But really, this is the range between 6 and 9. That is the lower 25%, which is only spread out by 3 units. And the upper 75% of the data set, well, there's one person, the outlier, that scored a 24, but the upper 25% of the data set is really only spread out by the difference between 12 and 16, which would be, 4 units. So this is a much more accurate box and whisker plot for this particular data set when you're dealing with outliers.